Hello again. Bless Block and Change the Lock Chronicles. I believe this is number 12. And in number 12, I want to talk to you. I'm wearing a different color today, slightly more somber matter of the elbow block. And why is this called the elbow block? Because this is what you have to do when people in organizations eat that bite the hand that feeds them clear off to the elbow. And that line originally comes from, believe it or not, all the way back to Amos and Andy, Freeman Gosden, and Charles Correll. Bit the hand that fed you clean off up to the elbow. That's where that phrase comes from. I always remembered that. I'm watching those reruns. And of course, as a child, you don't have a real sense of things. You just kind of see, ooh, that's a big bite. Okay, but then you live a little while and you learn something about life. I see this in organizations that the senior housing I work with deals with, and I've seen this in personal life. Just didn't always recognize it early enough. As someone with a big heart who didn't learn until relatively late that you had to put a big lock around it, I tend to go very hard. I was talking to a sister friend of mine about how, as Black women, we also tend to overcompensate anyway because our foremothers were brought here to give their entire lives enslaved to make sure everybody else was good. Everybody else who wasn't going to do the work wasn't thinking about doing the work, and we were going to make it happen for them completely. So there's still some of that left over, even as late as 2024, because our grandmothers lived under Jim Crow and that kind of thinking was common. And then within the Black community, a lot of messaging that still happens. You still have people coming up online talking about being a woman is being willing to slave for some man. You still get that idea. And the older you get, and the less you fit their phenotype, the more you should be willing to slave in order to have a man. But it's not just the messed up cohort of Black men doing this. Sometimes we as Black women do it to each other. Sometimes organizationally we do this to each other, and sometimes we do it around the diaspora because I get to see the brilliance and the beauty of Black people on an international level, and also to experience our brokenness, Pan African brokenness, and how other African people of African descent will come to this country and think that they stepped into a role where African Americans are going hard for them being here. Booker T. Washington basically gave the end of the energy of his life to prevent there from being an African Exclusion Act. Just like later on, because Mr. Washington was not there to go hard for Asians, there's the Asian Exclusion Act. African Americans have gone hard sometimes for our fellow members of African descent, and sometimes they come here and decide that they are going to try to assume a superior position. But what this really rolls down to, in addition to all the racism, it really has to do with this. African Americans, without us, there is no United States, period. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison would have had to take care of their own business, plant their own crops, grow their own tobacco, and do all that. They would not have had time to be founders of this country, period. James Madison had all this time to sit at Montpelier and write the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson had all this time to sit at Monticello and write the Declaration of Independence, although, granted, there's a war going on, so I won't say he was sitting pretty at the moment. But George Washington could sit up at Mount Vernon until he moved to the first White House as president. And all these other people were taken care of. There's nothing. And see, what happens is when people truly are, you're going hard for them, you're giving it all to make their situation good. Here's what happens. The people that you're doing that for, they are dependent on you in a way that you don't always understand because so much is done to make African Americans and particularly Black women feel like we have to be dependent on everybody else. But in reality, what's going on is that people need the value of your work, but they also know they ain't got it and they can't get it together. So they resent you terribly. And they worry that you have the right at any time to take away the benefits. So that passive aggressive resentment begins to work its way out in various different ways. And after a while, you come to realize, wait, I'm feeding you. I'm doing everything I can for you. And post 1865, it's voluntary. So people take what you do for them They're mad that you have it and can determine to give it to them or not and how much. And even when you show them a process, they are not always willing to do the work. They want what you have, but they do not want to do the work, and they resent that you're getting the results from the work that they are not willing to do. You see this organizationally, you see this in individual behaviors. So then what people do is they let themselves get more and more, because here's what happens. The more time you spend complaining about what someone else has, if that person is still moving and doing what they're doing, guess what happens? They're still going to get more and more, and you're still going to fall back more and more, and you're going to fall back and be much more complicated. So eventually, you're going to allow your behavior, and this has happened, I've seen this now multiple times in the past week and a half. You're going to allow your behaviors to let you sit there as an organization and an individual and let it slip how much you resent that person. And a lot of the foolery happened publicly in this last 10 days, both organizationally and independently, individually. So I was walking around minding my business, doing what I do, having a big heart, wanting to make sure that everybody's cool. The organization I work with, the senior housing I work with, we want to make sure everybody around us is cool. We're trying to make sure the least likely to apply and the least likely to get hired are able to get in the door. And again, we're doing our level-headed best within the confines of all fair housing and all fair hiring acts, going the extra mile to make sure that the least likely to benefit. And then people let you know after you've gone that extra mile with them that they don't appreciate it. And they're looking at what you have versus what you were able to share with them. And they also know they didn't have the power to really get there and stay there by themselves. And the more you overcompensate, the more they hate you for it because it still tickles their sense of inadequacy. So eventually, what they do, because of their inability to control their resentment, they eventually will gnaw your hand that is feeding them clear off to the elbow. But let me tell you something. If you bite off someone's hand to the elbow, they no longer have a hand to help you or a finger to lift on your behalf. And this is how we get here. When you see this, it will be Saturday morning. Oops. Oh, we're going to be doing some things expanding on the message and ministry of this book next week. And I'm going to be making things available to people to check out and so forth and so on. At work, there are going to begin to be things happening in terms of benefits and contracts and all the rest of this stuff. Some people have already been, people in the organization have already been dropped off and they don't, because again, once you let it be known, you're going to take the hand that feeds you and gnaw it off to the elbow. There's not a hand to give you anything or a finger to lift on your behalf. And that's why it's called the elbow block. The elbow block says, oh, that's what you're going to do. Well, you sit up there and get indigestion on what you had no business biting off. People, I mean, as I was talking to a sister friend today about, she's just kind of the same age as I am, more or less, and realizing I've gone hard for a whole lot of other people, but I haven't been going hard for me. And then I noticed that people don't reciprocate, and some of them have the same issues. I'm saying, just stop, feed yourself. Just stop. What God gave you is for you first. This is what we have in reverse. As black women, we think what God gave us is for everybody else. And I said to her, I said, look, God did not say that his daughters have to be out there earning it by the sweat of their brow. Go back and look at what God said was the result of sin for Adam and Eve. We have to deal with the results of dealing with men who have fallen. But God's perfectly able to move whoever he wants to take care of his daughters. So instead of you wrestling, I know what you're trying to do because I'm trying to do the same thing. But if God wants us to help some other color people, because all of them belong to him, then go ahead and set up your stuff so you get paid by people who really want the information and are not going to sit there mad because you have it and you cannot osmosisly, it's not a word, pass it on to them. Go work with some people that want to work. And of course, there are going to be African Americans in there. Don't get me wrong. We're not a lazy people. We are brilliant and we are beautiful. And when things are clicking, like myself and sister girl, it's wonderful. With the brother friends that I have, when things are clicking, it's wonderful. They're not lazy people. But the point I want to make though is that the wrong kind of people, no matter what you do to help them, eventually, if you let them, are gonna gnaw the hand that feeds them off clear up to the elbow. But when you realize you are there, you withdraw what's from your hand and you do not lift a finger. You bless them, block them, and put on a stout lock. All right, I'll see y'all next week. We have not been doing as many on the climbs because the April winds have arrived. Every afternoon is just ooh, just the April winds have arrived, so I'm not able to record outdoors. But when we get a day that works, or maybe I'll be able to get up to the eastern side of Buena Vista Hill and do some videos. We'll find out. But y'all have a good day now. Do not allow people to stay around. People who you find out you're doing stuff for them and you see that first sign of resentment, throw on the elbow block and keep it moving. All right. Y'all have a good day now. Bye.